2011, Glenn was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we had to make a choice about how we were going to handle that. And Glenn said, I feel great. I want to continue living my life and doing what I love with the people I love, and that meant making music. So we set out on a world tour, and he invited filmmakers to come along and document our tour to show the world what living with Alzheimer's was like. And so that's how we started our journey. And Glenn was so brave and courageous, and he helped remove the stigma of getting that diagnosis. And I think our film helped a lot of caregivers feel seen and heard because we were telling their story too. When we started out, we didn't realize that there were 16 million unpaid family caregivers out there caring for someone with Alzheimer's, and about 6 million who have been diagnosed with the disease. So it's a disease that touches almost everyone in this country. If it hasn't yet, it will, unfortunately. And it's a devastating illness. It's so difficult to be a caregiver, especially in the late stages of the disease for someone with Alzheimer's. And but we built a team. I had my 3 children, Ashley, Cal, and Shannon, with me, and some friends, and my nephew Matthew, and we all lived together and took care of Glenn in teams of 2 around the clock. And but as the disease progressed, we started to realize that we just couldn't do it by ourselves. We couldn't do it at home, because I had never ever dreamed that I could consider taking care of Glenn any other way but by myself at home. But then when I talked to the social worker, she told me that there are memory care communities. And I didn't even know these communities existed, but Ashley and I, we visited about 7 of them in our area in Nashville. And we finally found one that reminded us of some of the nice hotels we had stayed in while we were on tour, and decided to try it. And long story short, it turned out to be such a blessing. I always say I didn't put my husband in a home. I didn't place him in a facility. Those are such cold clinical terms that create and perpetuate a stigma around long-term care. But I say our family joined a memory care community because it became our community too. And I met so many other women who had husbands that had dementia, and we formed a support group for each other. We laughed together, cried together, prayed together, and it was the best place for Glenn too. So it was an incredibly hard journey. It's devastating to lose your loved one to this disease. But one of the great things about being in a community was all the different therapies. There was movement and exercise therapies, music therapies, horticulture, pet therapy. They had all kinds of clubs, art. So it was a really vibrant community with so much to do, lots of socialization.
Socialization, I think, is something that struck me as something, that a lot of people might not get at home. If you're afraid of putting someone, into the care of a care community, but then you think if there's like one person taking care of them, they're not getting a lot of social interaction because, you're so busy with everything else and taking care of them. But what I really loved seeing at where my dad was, especially at Abe's Garden, was the community there, and like their interactions with other residents and their interactions with the people who work there were all really pretty positive, and it was such a bright and light environment. So it was almost like their own little world, where you could go be alone in your room and have privacy, but you could go out and socialize if you wanted to, and there was always something going on. And I think stimulation is really key for happiness with people suffering from Alzheimer's. That's interesting things, the emotions that caregivers go through of, feeling guilty for being relieved, when the responsibility is taken off of your hands. That's an interesting thing that I talked to my mom about it, like the day that the day he started living at his first care community. I said, I feel so relieved and like a big weight that has been lifted off of me. But at the same time, I feel guilty for feeling relieved, and there's kind of, that ties in, I guess, with that stigma of care communities. that you're kind of putting your loved one aside. But the more we got involved and visited, the more at ease we felt, and that it was definitely the best thing for him.
Mm-hmm.